everybody, welcome to Beverly Cultural Center. Tonight's presentation is going to be on this very important topic, which is courageous dialogue and communicating truth. So I'm going to give the credit here for the people who developed this Courageous Dialogue Toolkit. It's from a published paper called Practical Wisdom Framework, and it was developed by Barbara Whitlock and Dr. Karen Bohlin, precisely to promote dialogue in a polarized environment. They came up with this Courageous Dialogue Toolkit to promote conversations and dialogue among people. After the polarizing 2016 election, we are now finding ourselves in a very similar political and cultural landscape. So it's good that we be prepared to continue being able to talk to people. So why is this topic so important? So we have more ways to connect than ever before, as we all know, but we're even further apart ideologically, politically. It's become more polarizing. People are being categorized without paying attention to the individual, right? And also finding common values. So loneliness, isolation, lack of connection is actually a public health crisis, according to the US Surgeon General. So a recent survey showed that 61% of Americans have felt lonely at some point, and some of them even frequently. So social connection is the #1 factor for people's happiness, for success, for good health, yet it's failing in our society. So I'm going to read this quote here. Arthur Brooks, in his book, Love Your Enemies, writes about the need to change a culture of contempt where people with different viewpoints are seen as unworthy of love to a culture of dialogue where disagreements are embraced and we still love those that we disagree with. So we'll get into this topic a little bit more into this. How can we still love each other and still converse and still have very different viewpoints? Okay, so we're going to use some ideas here. I'm going to start with a quote here from Saint Josemaria Escriva. This was a letter in 1933. This was when there was political unrest in Spain. It was just before the Spanish Civil War. And he invites people to live charity, not giving in to things that are true, not compromising truth, but being open to different viewpoints. So he wrote, "True charity, the kindness that stems from prudence, will enable you to speak with discernment at the right moment and in the right way. It will make you sensitive to your neighbor's needs and circumstances, though not giving way when it would be wrong to do so. And at the same time, it will confirm your faith, enliven your hope, and lead you to give thanks to God for having kept you in the fullness of truth." So we have the fullness of truth. How do we communicate it? How do we apply it to the circumstances that we're going through right now? So what is courageous dialogue? What was in this Courageous Dialogue Toolkit that can be a good tool for us as we navigate meeting different people, talking about our viewpoints without fear? So how many times have we been in a situation where we think very differently from someone and we're just afraid to say anything? So it's facing that fear. It's being more intellectually prepared, more emotionally prepared when we find ourselves in these circumstances. So there's 3 purposes for these toolkits. First, light. So when we have a conversation, do we really think about coming up with a new understanding and knowledge of different viewpoints? So we want to generate light. We can come up with different viewpoints. It's actually quite enriching if we talk with people who think differently from us. You know, we can disagree, but how do we come to find these common values with the people that we're talking to? And we can find out, why do they believe what they believe? Take the time to listen, seek to understand, and always be ready to share your ideas. And a good question to start with could be, would you be open to hearing my perspective? Would you be open to hearing another viewpoint? And so it's an invitation. And the second is energy. So this idea of dynamic learning and growth, if any of you have ever done any rock climbing or scaling a wall, it's kind of rock by rock. So conversation is like that. It's kind of like climbing a wall. So it's passing on these nuggets of truth and helping others to climb a ladder towards a greater understanding, and vice versa. So use objections to make ideas better, to make ideas sharper, and create kind of this curiosity for learning, why does this person think the way she does? And then lastly is warmth, this interpersonal trust and community. And to really go deeper into this idea of everybody is worthy of our respect, regardless of their values and regardless of their views. So here's where we can highlight the importance of deep friendships and helping others to flourish from an understanding of the context that we find people in, their situations, their backgrounds. And I remember reading a quote that people will not remember what you said as much as how you made them feel. So how are we making this person feel? Are we making them feel bad for what their beliefs are? Are we helping them to, are we really trying to come to a greater understanding of why they think what they do? So keep building trust, keep deepening friendships. Friends can disagree, but the friendship can still be there if the friendship was deep to begin with. Okay, so in any challenging situation, so in any conversation you're in, or if it's getting heated, or you're not agreeing on anything, it's really important to keep these three assumptions very much in mind. So the first is the dignity of the person. And I wanted to read this quote. There's a wonderful book by David Brooks called How to Know a Person. And he writes a story. He actually ended up interviewing a woman in Waco, Texas, who was 93 years old. And he realized that she wasn't very responsive to his interview style. Like, he just wasn't pulling a lot of information from her. And he could tell the conversation wasn't really going as well as he'd hoped it would go. So in walks Jimmy, this local pastor, and clearly they've known each other for many years, and she immediately lights up. She starts talking. You can tell there's a relationship there. So David Brooks writes, Jimmy, the local pastor, walks in and she becomes a different person. Her face lights up. When Jimmy sees a person, any person, he is seeing a creature who is made in the image of God. When Jimmy sees a person, he is trying to live up to one of the great callings of his faith, to see a soul of infinite value and dignity. So he said, I'm going to try to be that Jimmy. So when you talk with people, am I seeing a person who's worthy of my respect? No matter what they believe. A lot of times we'll identify a person with their action or their belief, but can we kind of get past that and see this person as a child of God and worthy of my attention and my respect? And David Brooks, in the same book, he says our attention, our listening shouldn't be on a dimmer switch. It should be all the way on, right? So sometimes, when we pay attention to people, it's like, I'm gonna dial down and then dial up a little bit. I'm not so interested in this. I'm gonna dial down. He said, it can't be on a dimmer switch. We have to give a person our full attention. So relationships are based on trust, and trust. Are we trustworthy? And do we trust that? Do we show this person that we trust them? And when there's trust, then you could say anything that's on your mind, and that friendship's not going to suffer. And then lastly, we have this obligation to live well, to live according to our nature, and to help others to flourish. So that nature is really ultimately to live for God, to be united to God, and to help others to flourish and to thrive, to be in an environment where they're loved and they're respected. So it's kind of a busy slide here, but I'm just going to focus on the virtues. And these are virtues that we need to continue cultivating if we're going to keep fostering good conversations with people. And the first is courage. So overcoming fear to pursue what is good and what is right. So we do have to check in with ourselves from time to time and think, what am I afraid of? If I'm in a conversation and out comes a topic that I feel like I don't know much about or could get kind of heated, what are my fears? Am I fearful of getting rejected, of what this person's going to think about me, of what this person's going to say about me. And this is where we have to train ourselves also to learn facts. How do other people do this? Just keep learning, but not to be afraid of having a conversation. Second is humility. Admit what we don't know and what we don't understand. And sometimes you have to ask the person, can you help me understand that better? Or can you help me understand your viewpoint better? Or what makes you believe that? Or what makes you think that? And start the conversation. And this openness, inquiry, study, listening, open to refining our own perspectives. And this idea of being emotionally prepared too is really important. You know, do we go into these conversations? And sometimes we'll have these first reactions of anger or disbelief that this person thinks this. But do we go in there with this openness? Because this person has a reason for thinking what she thinks. Fair-mindedness. Do we consider? Do we question? You know, do we research? Patience. To trust the process of reflection and discovery. We're not going to change people's minds overnight. We're not going to get them to what, if we know that there's something that's an objective truth and the person's a little far off from that or far off from that, we're not going to change their minds right away, but can we give them this nugget of truth? Can we get them closer to seeing that? And then finding out why they believe what they believe. Maybe there was some occurrence in their past life, or maybe there was some situation that wasn't helpful for that. So is there that friendship there? Is there that trust? And then lastly, love. To listen to ideas with attention and respect, whether we agree with them or not. They deserve respect because this is what this person is thinking. So to think about all of these habits that we can continue cultivating. Are you familiar with Arthur Brooks and his book, Love Your Enemies? Arthur Brooks is wonderful. He teaches a course at Harvard, which is very popular, and it's precisely on happiness. And he talks about disagreeing better, but not disagreeing less. So he has a really good video on this. You can Google this, but he talks about 3 rules to disagree better. Sometimes we find ourselves in this position where we're trying to just agree with the person. It's always more comfortable to be with someone we agree with on everything, but that's not going to always be the case. We're going to disagree on things, and it's enriching. It's part and parcel of life, relationships. Don't be afraid of that. So how do we disagree in a way that doesn't sacrifice a relationship? So he talks about 3 rules. So, this is 2, 3, 4. This should be 1, 2, 3. So number 1, don't attack or insult. This actually seems obvious, but it's not obvious to everybody, so don't attack the person. Like, why do you think that? That's just, insane, or that. So be careful with certain types of language. Don't even try to win. It's not an argument. Remember, you're trying to shed light. You're not trying to win an argument. Don't turn it into a debate. Some of you, I'm sure, have good debating skills, but it's not a debate. It's a conversation. And maybe you are right. Maybe you do have the perspective that is more in line with objective truth, but you're not there to win an argument. So don't attack, don't insult. Number 2, never assume the motives of another person. How many times do we fall into this? This person thinks this because, never assume the motives. And the best thing is to ask, I want to understand why you think that. And then you could share your ideas. Would you be open to another perspective? And 3rd, use your values as a gift, not as a weapon. So Arthur Brooks talks about if you bring someone a bouquet of flowers and then you hit them over the head with it, they don't care whether it's a bouquet of flowers or whether it's a stick. This action of you're trying to hit the person over the head with your values clearly is not going to win them over to your side. So use your values as a gift. Use it as an invitation. How about this? How about thinking about it this way? So it's a gift. It's an offering. You're helping a person to think a different way, to see another perspective, but you're not hitting them over the head with it. So he has a really good video on this, so I highly recommend to take a look at that. But so keep these things in mind, that it's okay to disagree. Think about the last time you had a conversation with a person when you disagreed with them. How did that go? What could you have done better? So get the conversation going and try to get to a point where there's a greater amount of understanding. And okay, this is a great story. Do you all know who Robbie George is? Robert George and Cornel West, who actually did a short run for president recently. So these are two professors, a powerful friendship. They just came out with a statement on honesty and courage. So I'm going to read some things here. Robert George is Roman Catholic. He's a Thomist. He's politically conservative. You know, the way he looks is pretty much what he believes, right? So very typical conservative Catholic look, very prolific writer. Cornel West is the grandson of a Baptist preacher. He was steeped in the formation of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, politically liberal. He's politically progressive. Even with all that, they couldn't be more different, but they're very, very good friends. And just watching them kind of have a conversation and be open to the ideas of the other person, but you can kind of see where they don't give in on what they absolutely believe is right, but they're laughing and they're calling each other brother. Like, it doesn't affect their friendship. So they released a statement because they see the landscape right now, the political, ideological, cultural landscape. So they just recently released a statement calling for deep courage, deep honesty, and deep humility from all sides. So this is their quote. They write, "We need the honesty and the courage not to compromise our beliefs or go silent on them out of a desire to be accepted or fear of being canceled. We need the honesty and courage to consider with an open mind and heart points of view that challenge our beliefs, even our deepest, most cherished identity-forming beliefs. We need the intellectual humility to recognize our own fallibility, and that too requires honesty and courage." So you see how they're using all the virtues that we talked about before? So they use it in their friendship, they use it in their conversations, and now they're making an appeal to society to use these virtues to have deep conversations and to be open to other beliefs. So it's a great story. They have great interviews that are out there. So highly recommend that you kind of look into that as well. So this right here is the core of courageous dialogue. And just remember the 4 R's. And this is all about asking good questions. So essentially what they're saying here is they're at the heart of courageous dialogue is a virtuous response. So we can no longer be on the sidelines anymore. So we do have to be out there talking with people, clarifying things, transmitting truth in various ways and in language people can understand. People make decisions much more on an emotional basis, less on a rational, critical thought basis. So we need to recognize that and just say, acknowledge that and work with that. So the 4 R's are remember, reflect, recalibrate, and respond. So the first is remember. Remember to practice listening, to honor first reactions and offer empathy. So that means when you see a person who's angry, so you've said something person doesn't agree with, or you're talking to someone who's had something happen to them that has made them upset or emotionally charged, and you find out what happens and honor that first reaction. That's something they don't have control over in that moment, and to honor it and offer empathy. So remember is this offering empathy. I hear you. I can understand why you feel hurt and frustrated. It sounds like you feel emotion, like angry because what the situation is, right? Somebody, I don't know, said something bad about you. Adopt an attitude of curiosity and understanding. So what this Courageous Dialogue Toolkit is doing is giving some words and phrases that we can use that could be very helpful. It's like, I hear you. I can totally understand why you feel hurt, why you feel frustrated. Help me to understand the situation. Can you tell me more? Inviting a person to speak more is always helpful. It's like they have your ear, and how can you invite them to help you understand their situation better? And you can ask them, what bothers you the most? So it's kind of taking these steps to ask good questions so that you can understand this person better. So reflect is press pause and reflect. So you kind of see where this is going. It's like we have to be in control over our own emotions. We are also going to have emotional reactions and responses. But this idea of listening, pausing to see what are the goods or values in this conflict. David Brooks talks about finding the disagreement in the disagreement. So if you don't agree for pro-life issue, for example, what's the disagreement under? So one person thinks a woman should have the right to choose. Another person thinks, no, abortion is wrong in all instances. Well, what's the disagreement under that? And what's the agreement? So people agree with compassionate response towards the mother, but they disagree on how to go about doing it, for example. So that's kind of a technique that you can kind of get to the root of that. But to see what are the values that we have in conflict and what are the values that we have that are similar. Second, what might this situation look like from the other person's point of view? So you're always trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes. You're always trying to live this empathetic response. Third, what strengths do you have that can help you handle this? Patience. So we have to grow in patience, resilience, courage to say the right things. And how can I be a part of the solution? How can I help this person? Or if it involves ourselves, how can I respond in a way that's more charitable, in a way that's more open, in a way that's more patient? So the second R would be recalibrate. So we are body and soul. And when we're constantly thinking like this, like constantly trying to be that light, that energy, that warmth, we can also become very tired from that. So to calm the stress response. So they talk about this as recalibrating, like resetting. Like don't keep things in without finding a way to release them. They talk about it as recalibrating the mind, right? So we need rest. We need to have some calm, have some peace, and do something you enjoy. So walk, exercise, sleep, art, music, prayer, meditation, whatever helps us to calm will make us more prepared to keep doing this, to keep those conversations going, to keep up friendships, to keep dialogue open. So recalibrate, and then respond to offer support. So this is where we can spring into action. You can ask the person, how do you want to handle that? This is a difficult challenge. What's one step you can take right away? How can you help this person to get one step closer to resolving it or to a solution? Or maybe the next step is to wait, or maybe there's no action to do in the moment, or maybe there is. What support do you need from me? How can I help this? Okay. And then lastly, I'm going to just end with some quotes here. St. Josemaria Escriva from the same letter, he writes, now and always we have to be ready to live in harmony with everyone, to give them through our friendship an opportunity to draw close to Christ. We have to feel united to everyone without distinctions. And then Arthur Brooks says from Love Your Enemies, when I call for a standard of love, I am asking all of us to listen to our hearts, to think clearly, look at the facts, so that we can truly lift people up and bring them together. So he has made this his life's work, to find a way to unite people, to keep them talking, to keep them dialoguing, to bring about a better and a deeper understanding on everybody's parts. So what I see now is that it's more and more important that we learn how to do this, that we can be it was pretty much what he's inviting us to do, that instrument of unity among people. And again, keep in mind what he says. It's not about agreeing with everything. We don't have to agree with everybody. But how do we get to that point where that's respectful and we can still foster deep friendships? We're open to questions, comments, experiences. Do you think this is something that could be valuable in your own relationships, conversations with people? And maybe think about, I don't know, I would probably venture to say almost all of us have been in situations where we've been faced with someone who came out, who was expressing a different opinion, and we were afraid to speak, or maybe we did speak and it didn't turn out well. So we're going to find ourselves in these situations, but we need to keep finding ways to put all of these things into practice. So it's a lot of information, but just maybe can we pull out some pearls? Check her website, and she has a lot more of this information on there about Courageous Dialogue.